It's me, Brianna, and you are listening to Are We Caught Up Yet? Marvel Edition. You can find us on youtube.com/SaveTheGameMedia and podcast services. If you want to show Save the Game Media some extra love and get early access to all of our content, you can find us at patreon.com/SaveTheGameMedia. We have like a bunch of cool stuff over there. We have some post shows. We have early access to all of our shows. We do I Hate My Friends over there, which is us just goofing off. We have host versus host, all of that stuff. You can access it for $1 or $3 if you want to do the free trial for 7 days. So check it out. Today I'm joined by my co-host and friend, Sam. Before we get started today, how are you and what have you been watching?
I'm all right as usual, busy as usual. Nothing really to report there. What have I been watching?
Is Shogun done?
Yeah, that was done. But technically, I have rewatched that. I've rewatched Shogun. I don't know whether that qualified because I technically already watched it.
Well, I don't think you ever reported your thoughts on the whole show as a whole, like after it was finished. Like I don't think we ever got the shows over.
Yeah, well, I might have done. I feel like I have, but maybe I'm imagining that. But as
you
a
talked
recap,
about the show, to be fair.
Yeah. As a recap on thoughts, the show was pitched as like a 1-season thing because they were just covering the entirety of the novel, which they did. But in the weeks since the finale aired, it has now been. I think it's officially been renewed. I can't remember exactly what the news story was, or whether it was like essentially guaranteed, or whether it was official. But season 2 and season 3 are happening. So that's interesting because they're verging into territory where they don't have source material to go off of, which is typically a bad sign. You know, typically you don't want that because then they start making creative choices and it can get a little bit dicey there when you don't have a foundation to build off of when you're adapting a story. That being said, I'm in a very unique place with Shogun because I truly do think it's probably one of, if not the most perfect singular season of a show I've ever seen. Like I can't praise it highly enough. Seriously, people, if you haven't watched Shogun, watch it. And the way that it ends, obviously without any spoilers, as the novel ends, I kind of wish that we were in a reality where they did just leave it there because it is so perfect as and encapsulated as a singular thing, as a one and done. That being said, because of how good it is, not only can I understand why they want to make more because of how successful it's been, but also I will gladly be a hypocrite and consume as much of it as they're willing to give me as long as the quality remains high, which they have given me no reason to doubt them thus far. I could ramble for a long time about how good Shogun is. I will encourage you to watch it. I will encourage anybody to watch it. It's just such an excellent historical drama. It is. Yeah.
Okay. All right, there we go.
So I rewatched that.
Mm.
because I can't get enough of it. And did I watch anything else? I feel like I did. Oh, I have started watching something on Netflix called Eric,
I think I
which is
saw that. I
it's
don't think I
Benedict
watched it.
Cumberbatch.
Oh, I like him.
It's I've only seen the first episode, but I don't think it feels like a thing that's drawn on like real life, real world events.
Mm.
Um, but that sounds stupid if you've seen parts of the show. The premise is, and I won't spoil. Well, I've only seen the first episode, so I'll just give you the basic premise: is that Benedict Cumberbatch is a guy who, kind of like a Jim Henson, where he created a television show that is all about puppets, like a Sesame Street or whatever,
Oh boy.
and he did that and has a son, and for in certain circumstances the kid ends up missing. Again, I don't know because I've only seen the first episode exactly what's going on there. But they're setting it up as the usual tropey kind of mystery thrillery thing where you're seeing lots of weird looks from different characters and little hints and tips that might suggest that this person's involved or this person's involved. And the I guess very minor spoilers for the end of the first episode, but it is just the premise of the show. I think I haven't seen any marketing, but I would imagine that this has been included in at least some of the marketing. The kid, before he disappears, talks about creating like his own puppet for the show, like but it's like a suit, like a full-sized puppet type thing, a character on the show. And as the first episode ends, Benedict Cumberbatch, obviously, he sort of starts drinking and he gets like delusional because his kid's gone and he's stressing out and everything, struggling at work. And then he, I would assume, begins hallucinating this puppet character. And the first episode ends with this puppet character that his kid dreamed up and drew sketches of and stuff, wandering around his apartment, telling him that he is going to help him find the kid. So it's weird. It's like both surrealist in that sense, but it's also playing into the usual kind of, not that this might necessarily mean anything to you, but like for me, it's drawing on things like Broadchurch and other thrillers or even like biographical stuff, about missing people cases. It's a weird blend, but I like where it's going so far. Could completely poop the bed. I don't know, but I will assuredly probably report back in the coming weeks as I watch more.
Okay, I look forward to that. It looks like it's brand new to Netflix, so
it is, yeah, brand new.
It makes sense why I had seen it briefly, because it would be right posted in your face when you open Netflix. Yeah, all right. I'm trying to think if I've watched anything. I mean, I watched the stuff for today, which was, to be fair, 3 films. I've been watching a lot of anime. I won't get you guys too deep into it, but I will say I think that if everybody wants to watch a fun anime, I really think Delicious in Dungeon is really fun. I'm having a great time with it. It's this really ridiculous show about like this. It's almost like a Lord of the Rings party where there's a human. What do they call him? A half man is what they call them. But it's like supposed to be like some sort of hobbit kind of person, and then an elf, and then a dwarf. And so there's like 4 people, and the human's human sister got eaten by a dragon, but it was in a dungeon where you can like if you get resurrected, like you'll be fine, like you can still live. So they're trying to get to her before her body is digested in this dragon's stomach. And so they're like, it's it's called Delicious in Dungeon because the party is so poor that they can't afford to buy any food supplies. So they end up with a bunch of spices. And since the dwarf is been living in the dungeons and like he knows how to like cook all of the dungeon monsters into like good dishes, so they like just like go around and kill a bunch of monsters and eat them. And it's like it's simultaneously like so gross, but like also the food looks so good when it's done that you're like, oh no. it's really funny. It's done by Trigger Animation. For anybody that's familiar with the animation studios, they're a really big studio that big is in like famous. They're incredible.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation of the week because that's what I've been watching and I think it's really good. I've also just been watching New Girl again, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Well, nobody asked me, but I am wearing a Spider-Man sweater today, you guys.
As if we couldn't see.
One. Some people can't.
Well, I suppose that's true.
I decided to be topical today and wear a Spider-Man sweater. It's new. It's my new sweater. Yeah. I just wanted to point that out because I think it's fun and it's cute and it's a comfy sweater. Not that we're sponsored by anybody, but I really like Steady Hands. So if you guys want to buy merch, nerd merch, it's mostly anime stuff, but there is Marvel stuff, specifically Spider-Man stuff. So anyways, we're going to talk about 3 films today. So let's get going. Not that there's like too much. Not that there's too much happening, but I watched the Raimi Trilogy. I assume you watched it as well, but
yes,
don't want to speak for you. So we have our 3 films, which is Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, which was they came out, I think it's 2002, 5, and 7, if I remember correctly. General thoughts. I had fun. I think that these are like not only are they like classic older films, like it kind of has that like 2000s vibe like of cheesy films. But it also has that like cheesy like hero vibe. But like I kind of expected it. So I think I enjoyed it. Like I think I had a good time overall. There were a couple of times that I was like, all right, you guys, that was probably a little too much cheese right there. But I think that overall it was done well. I think if you want to have just a fun time, and personally, I was either crocheting or puzzling while I was watching these. So just, little side activity while you just leave a little film on, let it play. Yeah. Good time. What are your general thoughts on this trilogy?
Well, this is difficult because this is probably the biggest or one of the biggest times where nostalgia is going to play a massive part in opinion, because I grew up with these films more so than I even have done with the MCU, right? I would have been
barely born.
When did this release? April 29th. So I would have been 6 when this film came out. No,
I don't think that's right because I would have been 6.
No, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's not math.
4, 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah, between 4 and 5. Close enough. Yeah, like I think undeniably, detaching from looking at this through a modern lens, particularly for you, which is inevitable because I would assume you didn't say, but I assume this is the first time you've seen any of these films.
It's my first time I've seen the third one, but not the first two.
Okay.
Although I've only seen them once, and it was a very long time ago.
Sure. Detaching all of that, I think that a lot of people say that the X-Men films, because technically X-Men came first, revolutionized the modern superhero film. But really, for me, and I would say mainstream wise, as big as X-Men was, I do think Spider-Man is really where things took off. I do think that the films overall hold up still pretty well. They're certainly more campy than even the MCU is. But again, that's very much of the time, of the era where they were adapting comics a little more literally, and not really refining the characters and their traits and three-dimensionalizing them all that much. It was sort of playing far more into the tropes of the character, the stereotypical archetypes, which is fine. I think that as long as you lean into that, and know that you're doing that, then you can execute it quite well, which I would argue all three films do. Yeah, there is, I mean, obviously for me, but even I think, like you say, either not having seen one of them or haven't seen them for a long time, there is just like a feel to the films that feel cult classic-y, where the production value, for the most part, across all three films is impressively high. Particularly because not many things were doing stuff like this at the time. Yeah, that like top level. Obviously, I'm almost rambling into deeper thoughts, but top level, I think, if I'm going to break it down film by film, I think, and I know we'll circle back to this at the end, I would say Spider-Man 2 definitively is the best of the three. That's the general consensus. I have always and will always agree with that. Then Spider-Man 1 in the middle, and Spider-Man 3 is the weakest.
Yep, I will agree on the 3 being the weakest.
But I think as a trilogy, they're all good times. Like, I don't think any of them are objectively bad. I think that there are weak points certainly in all three. But overall, the campiness, and the fun that I can kind of tell everybody on screen is having, it captivates you. I think there's a whimsy to this that you don't really see in many modern films, which is nice.
Okay. Alrighty, well, let's get into it a little bit more. So we usually start here with our soundtrack. I will say, I think that they did a really good job on the soundtrack. I think that this clearly, like, the soundtrack clearly has an identity. Like, there's like the theme song. There's a bunch of really good tracks that kind of play off of the theme song. I don't think that this is like the best. I mean, the thing is like, how are you even going to beat Spider-Verse? Like, that soundtrack is insane. So I will say it's like not like the best Spider-Man like soundtrack ever, but I will say it's a lot better than a lot of the generic Marvel stuff that we get now. So I think I really enjoyed the soundtrack. I think that it was well placed. I think that, yeah, I overall enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, again, nostalgia talking. I think many, or not, I shouldn't say many, but there are a good number of tracks from across these films that are seared into my brain. I think that certainly more so than most MCU films, they found a motif early on first film and they stuck with that throughout all three, nice and consistent. But there are riffs and variations throughout.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they do a good job as well of giving secondary characters and villains little musical motifs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're talking about Goblin in the first film or like Dr. Octopus in the second, I think that it's nice to give a little musical identity to each of the characters as well.
You just government named him. It's Doc Ock. God.
What is Dr. Octopus, isn't it? Yeah.
I know.
For those maybe less in the know, I don't want to confuse them right off rip. That's not what I'm doing. That I just said the full name for some reason.
I know. It scared me.
Yeah, no, I think the music is ultimately very good, and like, not that this is score wise, but how can you complain when you got a little bit of Nickelback in the first film? You know, film ends, get some Nickelback. Wow.
Okay. Also, like, I think it's either the second or third one. I think it's the second one, to be honest. But Dashboard Confessional coming on, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
all right.
Yeah.
It's a freaking good song. I used to sing that song all the time.
Certainly dates these films.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you know when they came out. You're like, oh, Nickelback. Okay, yeah. So they were the hotness back around this time. Fair enough.
I don't know. I will never get over, like, Nicolas Cage and Nickelback are the same thing in my head, even though I know they're not.
That makes literally no sense.
If you think about overall feeling of, like, how people feel about Nickelback and how people feel about Nicolas Cage.
Don't you dare insult Nicolas Cage like that.
Dude, some people love Nickelback. I'm not messing with you. I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm saying, like, there's, like, a renaissance of, like, everybody hated Nickelback, and then all of a sudden people are like, okay, but they're kind of campy. Like, I like them. And it's the same thing with Nicolas Cage.
I guess. I think there are maybe more apt comparisons for both sides of that equation, but sure.
It's the same thing in my head.
Okay.
Can you imagine if Nicolas Cage performed with Nickelback? That would be a wild time. Okay. Next on our, like, on our, I say our, my list is Bechtel test. I don't know if the first one might pass the Bechtel test, but I actually don't think it does. The only way that it would is if MJ talks to his aunt. But even when she does talk to him, she's usually talking to him about Peter. So I don't think that there's, like, a actual conversation that happens between two named female characters.
These things didn't matter back in the day, you know?
Yeah, women didn't matter back in the day.
No.
No rights.
Nope.
Yeah, do you stand by that one?
Back in the good old days.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
She was just making sandwiches. Uh-huh.
Yep. If only.
Sandwich sounds really good right now for once.
Yep.
Subway is so gross, though. Just saying. Anyways.
I can't say I've ever had a Subway.
You know what they say, eat fresh.
I don't think you do, to be honest.
You really don't. It's so nasty. I don't wish it upon anybody. Okay, what's worse? Okay, I promise this will be a quick tangent. What's worse? I just want to call out my siblings because they're both nasty. Not only is, like, Subway kind of just, like, generally gross, where the ingredients are, like, you know, they kind of been sitting there for a while. My siblings would eat the tuna melt one. It's just like a bunch of tuna slop on a foot long. It's so disgusting. Makes my eyes water just thinking about it. I'm so horrified. They both would do this. It's so gross. Anyways, love you guys. But but you nasty. Sick little freaks, you know. Have you ever had a like tuna, whatever, tuna salad sandwich is usually what they're called, but
I don't think so.
really, I don't know if I'd recommend it, but a lot of people enjoy it. You just do like tuna, like the canned tuna, get the juices out, put it in a little bowl, mix it with some mayo, put it on your sandwich. Some people put relish in there, like little pickles. Okay, that
So
was my quick.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, that was my quick tangent. Okay, so we have a lot to cover. A couple things I wanted to ask you about. One, Stan Lee, obviously, I know for sure appeared in the third one, but I was kind of spaced out. Did he appear in the first or second one or no?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I missed it. Bummer.
Yep. I can't off the top of my head remember where he is in the second one. In the first one, he is he's next to Peter in the parade on the street before Goblin attacks. He says something. He points up at something. I can't remember what he says, but he's talking about something. And him and Peter have a very, very, very brief interaction. I don't even know if Peter says anything back, but makes one of his quips and then
the classic Stan Lee quips.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that he's been in so many films and it's still like all of the lines are delivered so cheesily. it's so good. I really love it. Yeah. Okay. That was one of the questions I had. I'm sure I'll think of the other ones later. But I will say, in watching these films, I kind of realized how much these films have like kind of stayed alive in like modern day. Not necessarily people just like watching them constantly or whatever, or even talking about them constantly, but there are so many memes.
Mm-hmm.
So many memes from these films that I don't even think I like registered until I saw it like in the film, and I was like, oh my god, I'm watching a meme right now.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff in there, like the you got to go through me. Like I think the second film is the one that is like memed the most. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the third one is memed a lot as well for obvious reasons.
Am I crazy or is he okay, wait. I have to get technical for a second. For when he's in the black suit, what is like his like official like title name? Is he still just Spider-Man? Like how do you designate? Because I don't think he's technically Venom, but it's also like Venom.
Yeah, no, he's not Venom. Venom
right.
is the name. Well, typically the name the symbiote designates itself.
Yeah.
And it isn't. It doesn't then it doesn't have to, I guess, convert the naming convention of any given host. It's dependent on the host, I suppose.
So is there a technical term for when he's in the black suit or no?
No.
Okay.
No, well, I mean, it would just be Spider-Man, but like if you're referring to him not canonically or anything, but just referencing that version of Spider-Man, the nomenclature typically is just black suit Spider-Man.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So tying back into the memes, like him, just like the way that like Black Suit Spider-Man was acted, like his personality and stuff was so cringe. I was like, oh no, he turned into a dude, bro.
Yeah.
It was so bad. It was so bad. And I think that I'm not even gonna lie. I think it's partially, obviously it's partially writing, but I think it was also partially acting performance there. I think that's one of the very few times that I'm like, I don't know if that was the right call. But yeah, I think that I can understand why they would meme it because they
certainly camped it up in that third film. Yeah.
Some of the lines that he delivers, I wish I had like wrote them down, but
gonna put some dirt in your eye. Now dig on this.
There we go. Maybe he just didn't leave a little bit of dirt under his pillow for the dirt man.
You've completely lost me.
It's okay. If you get it, you get it, you know?
Clearly, I don't.
I'll send it to you later. There's a song on TikTok.
Okay.
It's a huge meme right now where
Okay.
it's a song and it's actually a really good song. Anyways, that's what it made me think of. But he should have just left dirt under his pillow is the TLDR. Okay. Maybe we can kind of talk about the journey of the characters over the films. A lot of the characters don't end up because we have like some isolated villains. We have like some like almost continuous villains because like Goblin kind of comes back, but it's like the son. But he's also like Harry kind of becomes a villain in like end of the first film and kind of is a villain in the second film, but not fully.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't committed to the bit yet. So I mean, I think that I specifically enjoy the journey of like the main three. So like MJ, Harry, and Peter. Um, I think I like watching their relationship kind of shift and grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will say that what do I want to say? I'm trying to like figure out how I want to direct the conversation. Okay, let's go ahead and start. I kind of want to talk about MJ specifically because I think that her character is the character I have the most beef with, specifically like in the writing. One, I think that like obviously like this movie is like a product of the time that it was made in part. I think that MJ like literally she gets like kidnapped multiple times in each film. She is
Mm-hmm.
kidnapped in each film. She's kind of helpless. She's just screaming a lot. Um, I think that like there's a lot of stuff that I think that they don't play right with her character. Like the fact that she like just suddenly has somebody else that she's all of a sudden marrying. Like it really feels like no time has passed at all. And then she like breaks off her engagement to go, go be with Spider-Man. Um, and like that whole thing where it's like, I love you, but you clearly don't love me in the same way, and you're not willing to make any sacrifices for me. And it's like I understand that like Spider-Man also has his responsibilities, and we can kind of separate that conversation for like a separate thing. But like I think that like the way that he treats her still isn't okay. Um, and I think that the way her character is portrayed is also kind of just like damsel in distress, and like he cheats on her, she cheats on him. Like there's like a whole, yeah. I think that like as much as I love the MJ character, usually I think I had a hard time with this one. How do you feel?
I don't know that I have too much to say. She is fine in the role that the films give her. I think that the campy schlocky tone kind of, at least for me, alleviates some of those issues.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying that you do, but like I certainly don't take any of these films like seriously when I'm watching them, and not that that is necessarily an excuse to get around poor writing for a female character, but I feel that of the time that, again, like in comics, like I said, taking the adaptation very literally, in comics it is damsel in distress. She screams when someone captures her. She is all over the hero when they save her. And that's what MJ does. I think that certainly in 3, she has a little bit more runway to do stuff. Not that she is by any means more of a focus or anything, but I think the whole struggling actress angle going into the waiting, and I don't know. I like that there is at least that extra dimension to the character, however shallow it might be. Ultimately, I think that was welcome. But again, not an excuse. but these films specifically were certainly designed with MJ not in mind really at all. She was more just there because she's a character in the comics, and that
I mean, I
Peter
think
needs the love interest that is the will they won't they end up together thing, that is the stereotypical, you know. So yeah, but I think like Kirsten Dunst performs her well with what she's given. I think,
agree.
like I say, she fills the role well. So in modern standards, could and should the depiction of an MJ type character be better? Sure. In kind of like, you know, even just what you've seen thus far with MJ in the MCU, obviously very different take on the character, but she certainly has more independence and variance and depth as a character than MJ displays in this trilogy. So
yeah, for sure.
You can tell that they certainly not necessarily directly looked at this film and considered the depiction, but just for the modern representation of MJ, they certainly tried to break away from the stereotypical archetypal role that could be very easy to fall into with a character like that. So
yeah. Yep. I mean, this film is definitely by men for men. And that's okay. It's okay.
That's all that superhero films were for a very long time, you know. And the I think rightly or wrongly, some of the problems that they are facing in the MCU right now, both in terms of like optics and fan response and by proxy box office, is an attempt to correct that. You know, that more and more as of late we have seen far more female-centric projects, and this isn't me saying I'm against that, for the record, but that as we got
in the kitchen,
indeed right, as we got past Endgame, we have seen more and more female-centric projects, and you're only going to see that increase from where we've gotten to thus far. It's going to increase in frequency, and even sometimes in like political social messaging, which is fine. But I feel like there is an argument that there is overcorrection, or there is a case for overcorrection, where you know, the superhero genre, typically speaking, historically and to this day, is mainly skewing male audience. So you don't want to steer too far. Again, most people hopefully shouldn't have a problem with female characters being in the spotlight. But there is very clearly a vocal portion of the audience, whether they're the majority right now or the minority, hard to decipher, that aren't overly fond of the sheer amount that we're seeing. So it's a tightrope balance to walk, that you can't really do the stuff that this film did anymore. But I'm sure that there is a good middle ground that maybe they are struggling to figure out right now. So it is very interesting to see where we are in terms of representation across the board, not just female, but gender and race and religion and all of that, to see where we were then with this and where we are now. I'm very interested to see how far we push further in one direction, or whether we do drift further back, and hopefully not too further back, but try to find a middle ground there. It's really, really interesting stuff to me, how all of this is panning out over multiple decades.
I think the thing that's hard is like you do want more diversity, like especially when you have such as like expansive universe. It makes sense that you would have such a like big, you'd have a lot more diversity, because theoretically the films should be a reflection of our real world, and our real world is not all just white straight men. Like that's just not our real world. So I think that it's difficult when the people making the films, they either understand the diversity, because I think that there's some directors and there's some casting people that like kind of understand of like, we like just want to have a reflection of the real world, and there's some people that are like, oh, we just need diversity, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that it's just it dependent on like who's making that film and who's making those calls. So I think it's a thin line.
Yeah. It should never be diversity just for diversity's sake. I think that there is nuance there that does need to be tackled to, at the very least, try and placate as wide an audience as possible, because at the end of the day, this is entertainment that needs to be profitable, and you need to appeal to as big an audience as possible for that to happen. So the example that I always pull back on, which I think is a positive example, is that they should never make Peter Parker a black character. They just shouldn't. One, because he isn't a black. That's my point. He should never be a black character because, one, he's canonically a white character in the comics, and two, that's the whole reason that they created Miles Morales, is that there's no point in replacing Peter Parker when you can just create a character that can sit alongside or even surpass those characters that pre-exist. And many would argue that is what's happening, that Miles Morales may actually be a more popular character right now than Peter Parker is.
In my heart, he is.
For sure. And I would probably maybe end up skewing on that side right now as well.
Well, but you know my true love, though. Hence my locket.
Nope. We're not doing that. Nope. So yeah, I think it's, again, like I say, it's the tightrope balance that, in terms of all this representation, there is nuance and intricacies that need to be tackled on both sides of the equation, right? Like, again, to be on the record very clear, inclusion and representation is vitally important. It's obligatory at this point. But we need to be careful that we aren't pushing out a section of the audience for whatever reason to accommodate a different section.
Listen, if we want to get rid of all of like the straight white men in Marvel, just kidding.
Bye, I guess. Bye.
You're not in the Marvel films as much as you want to be.
No, true.
I'll make an exception if you get a role.
Okay.
In Marvel, I'll make an exception.
Okay. So, like, Tom Hiddleston can't stay.
You're so right. He can stay.
Okay.
Go ahead. Give me your other examples.
I mean, there are plenty of other examples, but not ones that, like, you simp for
Drake.
hard. So there's not much. I mean, that too. Yeah, fair. Yeah.
Call myself out.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can make exceptions for Sam, for Drake, for Doctor Strange, for Loki.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, wait. I actually like our current Spider-Man too. He's fun.
Yeah.
There's the list.
Great.
I think that's most of them anyway.
Those are the token white men we can have. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really. Okay. Okay, so next thing I wanted to talk about was Harry's journey. Okay, let me talk through this. Okay, so we have Harry and Peter being friends, right? Harry knows how Peter feels about MJ.
Mm-hmm.
Starts dating her anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of not a very bro moment. And they end up breaking up. He ends up getting with MJ eventually. Like, it's kind of like in the second film. Harry has this whole thing where, like, his father dies. He thinks Spider-Man killed him. He hates Spider-Man with a burning passion. Peter never takes like 30 seconds to just say, like, hey, I know this looks bad, but this is what happened. Which, I mean, we get like a cool moment with like the butler guy later, but who just randomly shows up in the third film, by the way. But anyways, so then in the last film, he tries to steal MJ after like losing his memories, getting his memories back, tries to steal MJ, does technically kidnap MJ. That's neither here nor there. And then they have like this whole moment where it's like, you killed my father, prepare to die. And then they come together, and then they're besties again. And then he dies.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of mess in there. But I kind of enjoy like I enjoy the way that their relationship shifts, and I love the way that they kind of push each other. I will say they are very toxic. It's like a very toxic friendship, obviously. But I do think that they like I enjoy that there's like this through line that kind of travels between the three films, and I enjoy the way that they pay it off at the end with Goblin coming in to help him. Um and I enjoy the way that their dynamic, as well as like the dynamic with MJ, kind of shifts, where it's like if you really dig down into the emotions of like how would you feel, it's like, well, just because he was in love with her the whole time doesn't mean like I'm not still in love with her. He's clearly not right for her because he's not putting her first. He's putting this hero stuff first, so I can be the right person. But she doesn't want me. And like all of those emotions that are kind of bundled into it, I really love the way that they kind of played those emotions out.
Mm-hmm.
And I also enjoyed Harry's character.
Yeah, I think arguably Harry probably has the most interesting arc of the three main characters. I guess because technically the most things happen to him.
Mm-hmm.
He again, talking about sort of stereotypical archetypal roles, he fills the kind of anti-hero role, I suppose, where he is more often than not doing antagonistic or even outright villainous things, but you still root for him because the split dynamic between Peter and Harry and Spider-Man and Harry is so fractured and tumultuous. And then obviously you get the real revelation when he unmasks Peter, and from that point on knows who he is and in his head what he did. Yeah, I similar to Kirsten Dunst with MJ. I think that James Franco does a very good job with the role. He does kind of counteracts Toby, who is more sort of placated and timid. You know, James, just as an actor, is far more exuberant and not boisterous, but like outgoing and charming and stuff. Certainly womanizer vibes, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is, again, with how this trilogy decides to depict Harry, it fits very nicely in creating that tension of a love triangle type thing, where, you know, MJ very clearly does care about Harry very deeply. You know, they all grew up together, so that they all care about one another very deeply. Yeah, like I've never really known how to feel about Harry dating MJ, because it does feel like a backstab, and I guess technically it is by definition. But I don't know, like at the same time, I kind of understand that if two people are interested in a person and one person isn't really acting on that and the other person has the opportunity to, then, you know, it's a sticky situation to be in, where, you know, two bros like the same person, but someone has to pull the trigger, and when things clearly aren't really working out between Peter and MJ, I can't say if I was Harry I would have done different, especially if you have that pre-established very good friendship with
Yeah.
MJ and you've known her for so long and she comes to you for help and support emotionally. It's like slippery slope, but I can't say that I probably wouldn't end up doing the same thing. So
Yeah. I mean, I think like specifically like the stuff from the first film where they
sure.
start dating, I think it could have easily been like a conversation. Like, hey, I really like MJ. I think she might be interested in me. You don't seem to want to pursue this. I'd really like to see what happens here.
But then that gets rid of all the drama.
It does.
Really.
You're right. But I have genuinely and literally had this exact situation happen to me where me and my best friend liked the same person, didn't know that we liked the same person because she hid it from me. And then she like went behind my back and like anyways.
But is that you not assuaging some of the blame? Because did
No,
you
I'm
tell
not.
her that you liked the person as well?
She knew. Yes.
Oh,
I was very
okay.
vocal about it and he knew as well.
Oh. Well,
Anyways,
I have no point
but
then.
my point being, at the end of the day, like regardless, like it could have been just a communication. Regardless, I was happy for them, and I think that like that would be the same, theoretically, be the same sentiment that Peter would be like, I can't be with her anyways because I got to be Spider-Man, and so like if my two best friends are happy, then
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
It does make for some very interesting dynamics between the three friends. So,
Yeah.
what else do I want to talk about? I wanted to see which of the villains that we see is your favorite villain. Because we have
Venom.
a
No.
whole charcuterie board of villains now.
Yeah, we do. Many of which you've seen in like the Insomniac games and stuff. Obviously, but
Yeah, no, for real. So that was my thought. I was like, oh my god, I fought him.
so like the de facto obvious answer that most people will go to if you ask them this question, because I probably would have asked the question if you didn't. The de facto answer is Doc Ock.
Okay.
And I think I would agree overall as like a comprehensive villain. The one I guess it's a testament to the fact that, in my opinion, all three films have at least one very good villain. Because I think whilst Green Goblin probably comes off just a tad too much on the camp side for me.
Oh yeah, so campy.
I don't think with how the first film is specifically, I don't think he veers crazy off course where he's more campy than the film that he's in. But I think he does just teeter over the edge a little too much. But that being said, I still think that Willem Dafoe is an excellent actor. He crushed it. And I think that just in general, and this is obviously just reflective of Green Goblin in the comics traditionally, that he is a very compelling and interesting character where it's almost like split personality disorder, but it's brought on by the serum. And it's like Norman Osborn genuinely is it's like a Jekyll and Hyde thing, right? Where Norman Osborn is legitimately a very good person. A little too domineering and potentially protective of his son and the business, but that's relatively understandable. And the Green Goblin is just like delusional and completely out of control.
Delulu is the word that you're looking for.
Indeed. His glider is also very cool. But I think the villain I find the most interesting, so best villain would be Doc Ock. I think most interesting villain to me, and this is a weird, like not controversial, but out of left field answer for most people. I'd actually say Sandman.
I would actually agree with that. That's my answer.
because whilst his execution comprehensively isn't as strong as I would say either Doc Ock or Green Goblin, I think the narrative connections that he brings and the moral questions that are raised with him are probably the most compelling of any of them. And not that I have to go into detail about why, because we've both seen the films, but like tying it back into the fact that he was the one that was there and technically killed Uncle Ben. So that sort of like wraps up the trilogy in a bow, brings it back to where it started. I think that, combining that with the fact that Peter gets the symbiote and that brings out the darker side of him, and he is far more brutal with Sandman in the fights than he probably would have been otherwise. I mean, he surely would have been angry anyway, but like the serum with Captain America, I think the symbiote enhances the feelings that are already there, so the anger that he would have is just exacerbated by the fact that he has the symbiote. So I think that brings in the moral question of like, should he kill Sandman because he got revenge and killed the guy in the first film that he thought killed Uncle Ben, by technically didn't knock him out the window, but caused him to fall out the window that killed him. And then again, canonically, with how Sandman is in the comics, the daughter aspect of just he wants to look after his daughter, make a better life for his kid, and is going about it the wrong way. I think that kind of stuff is always very compelling to me as a motive, because it's so easily understandable. That, and I think that Thomas Hayden Church does a very understated but solid performance as him. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I think that I would definitely agree. Like Doc Ock is like, I think if you like have to give like an overall like best villain, but I think that like the arguments, like you said, that Sandman brings are just so compelling that it's like hard to not be interested, because it just opens up so many conversations. Of like what makes a villain and how easy it is to become a villain, like whether you intend to or not, right?
Yeah.
I've always really enjoyed that conversation. So yeah, I think that you took the words right out of my mouth.
And also, like, not that this has to spark conversation, but like reflective of real world things, of you always question, or I certainly do anyway, why people reoffend. Like they've been through the prison system, they've been punished, they've lost years of their life. Why on God's earth would you reoffend? Why would you go out and do bad things again? And Sandman is giving us a pristine example of why, right? Like you don't know everyone's story. You don't necessarily know the reasons why they're doing a thing. It can appear to look one way on the surface, but underneath there's actually, more often than not, I would say, very logical and even understandable reasons why people do the things that they do within given circumstances, obviously. So I like that about Sandman as well, that I look at him and I'm like, all he's doing is he's trying to make a better life for his kid. That's it. That's all he's doing. And he gets roped up in really bad stuff because of it. In the same way, like, again, not trying to make a conversation, but it reminds me of Ant-Man in a weird way at the beginning of that first film, where he's a convict, he's been convicted, he's released from prison, he's trying to set himself up, make his life better for his kid so they can be there. And the only way to do that in his head, in a expedient fashion, so that he can be there for his kid in the most important developmental years of their life, expedite that by committing a crime, by taking a shortcut to the money or to whatever. So like, yeah.
I mean, I will say, just because I think it has to be acknowledged, like specifically all of these are set like in America has like our prison system is meant to keep people down. Like the
Mm.
way that our entire government system is built is like once you're a convict, like nobody like will hire you, like you can't get a job, you can't get back into normal society. Like it's all built to keep you down. So I think that there's that like extra element specifically for like the prison element of things. But I just wanted to make sure that that was said because America's system is really, like, really messed up.
Yeah.
So, too many things. Freaking American government. Anyways, so yeah, I do definitely agree. I think that you bringing up like Ant-Man, I didn't think about it like that, but I definitely agree that it's like they're definitely very similar where like Ant-Man ends up as a hero and Sandman ends up as a villain just because of like the different circumstances, even though they had the same motivations.
Yep.
So very interesting. I One thing that I wanted to bring up just because I thought it was funny. So I was watching this with my dad, the first one, second one I watched by myself, and the third one I watched with my dad. Anyways, so when we were watching the first one, my dad always likes to throw out dorky one line. So he was like, "Oh no, Uncle Ben," and I said, "Dad, it's a canon event. You can't interfere."
Mm.
Because I freaking love Spider-Verse, you guys.
Nobody knew.
Yeah. Anyways, the other one I wanted to point out, just because I thought it was funny as well, is I felt like just going back to the Spider-Man video games, when he was fighting Venom, I felt like Dora the Explorer. I was like, you gotta make noise. And the whole time I'm like, oh my god, I fought this person. Like when Sandman, I was like, you gotta use the water. This is what happens when I play Spider-Man video games, I guess. I will say I do really, really like the way that they do Sandman in the video games because of like the how big his powers are and the way that it like kind of sweeps the whole city. Like I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a really fun fight in the video game. You guys should play the Spider-Man video game. Anyways, okay, another thing I wanted to bring up just because I think it's interesting is I've always like kind of like wondered like how do you balance being a superhero because it's like clearly I don't think that Peter Parker has the right answer, right? He's not making money, he's always behind on rent. He like even just beyond monetary obligations, like he falls through on most of his promises because there's always something going on. And you have to imagine New York is a really big city. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of crime in that city. So it never really stops. So I think that this is like always an interesting character, or like always an interesting question that comes up for me, specifically with Spider-Man, of like, how do you stop? And when do you stop? Like, at what point are you like, hey, I'm now 35 years old. My body can't do what it can't like used to be able to. Like, I have to stop now, or 40, 50, 60. Like what's that cutoff? And when do you stop?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is the core conceit of Spider-Man. Obviously, plenty of other heroes, but really it was Spider-Man that pioneered, if you want to say it like that, the idea of balancing those two lives. Because you see it reflected in like even Batman now and stuff like that. Even to a lesser extent, Superman, the Clark Kent working at the Daily Planet, which is very similar to Peter Parker working at the Daily Bugle. A lot of comics are very derivative. But yeah, like again, talking about compelling stuff, it sounds like a broken record, but that if it's handled well, that duality that's being depicted in most Spider-Man media is really interesting to me, and it doesn't get old. Because as much as it is more often than not retreading similar, if not outright old ground, the push and pull and the constant struggle that each new situation or each new villain presents particularly when, for the most part, Spider-Man villains do have some kind of essential role in both Spider-Man and Peter Parker's lives.
Mm-hmm.
There is that real turmoil that's introduced to the character. So yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I don't know how to phrase this. I think that like, so I'm reading right now. I'm still reading this same book series. It's called The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune. I'm reading the second one, and or I finished the second one. I need to read the third one. But they have this conversation as well, where there's like the heroes are called the Extraordinaries, and they're like constantly having this conversation where one of the main characters is like, I don't even know that I want to be a hero. I just know I have powers, and I feel incredibly guilty if I don't use them to save people, because like there's like specifically a time that he doesn't use them to save people, and one of like his friend's parents dies, and so he's like, I don't want to feel powerless again like that. So he like uses his powers, but he doesn't really want to be a hero. Like he's not like passionate about being a hero like some of the other Extraordinaries are. And so it's like it's a really interesting conversation where, because they treat it like a conversation of like they treat it as more of like a practical conversation in the book, where it's like really interesting of like kind of, you don't have to be a hero, so you should like make that decision for yourself. So just think it's always such an interesting conversation to look at from all of the different angles of like, what would you do,
Yeah.
like great power, great responsibility, all of that, but what if you don't want to do it, and then are those deaths your fault?
Yep.
So another thing I wanted to bring up, I really have beef with the third film. I cannot believe they used Gwen Stacy like that.
It just wasn't a big deal.
I cannot. They could have used any other name. Gwen Stacy. Hey, knock it off.
Yeah, but I mean, so like Gwen Stacy was still like a prominent character in the comics, but it was just certainly at that point she was essentially just an alternate love interest for Peter when MJ wasn't around.
Oh, interesting.
So
she's not our cool Spider-Woman?
No, not really.
I like her. The new and improved Gwen Stacy much better.
Yeah.
What did they say her name is? Gwanda?
Gwanda.
Yeah. That's what it is. I need to watch those films again.
Yeah.
That's all I've taken away from this, really.
Yeah.
No, okay. All right, what else? So I think we've talked about most of the characters. Is there any other themes, debates, questions, or story pieces that you wanted to bring up?
I just looked, by the way. Spider-Gwen, so her having powers, debuted in 2014. So
interesting.
Yeah, she's a relatively new hero. Obviously, the character has been around for a long time, but not Spider-Gwen. Sorry, your question was?
Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up? Like any other like discussion pieces, question pieces, like morality questions about the plot, story, through line, all of that fun stuff.
I'll mention her because she deserves a shout out. Aunt May is so adorable in these films. Rosemary Harris does a wonderful job.
What a cute, sweet old lady.
Yeah. Again, very different to the Aunt May that we know in the MCU.
Yes.
Very different.
Yes.
But Rosemary is far more traditional Aunt May than Marissa Tomei is. I love Marissa Tomei. She does a great job. But she isn't really traditional Aunt May. Because I feel like as much as Aunt May in the MCU works as like a maternal figure for Peter, the I don't know. Again, talking about like the turmoil of the split life thing, I feel like that it just adds an extra dimension to it. If Aunt May is like a frail old woman that realistically probably does need help and is more susceptible to dying at any given moment. Not to be morbid, but you know what I mean. Like even if when in the first film Goblin sort of bombs her as she's praying, right, and she's sort of, you could very easily see her not even being killed by Goblin, but just dying of a heart attack or being hit by a piece of debris and passing away. I feel like that isn't really a threat that you necessarily would sense the same vibe from if those kind of situations played out with Marissa Tomei's character.
Yeah. I also do think it adds an interesting dynamic if she doesn't know who Spider-Man is. As well as, like you were saying, like it adds another obligation on Peter's shoulders if he is needing to take care of her, right? Because then he has MJ and Job and her, unlike Spider-Man, and it just adds another obligation to the list.
My headcanon typically with Spider-Man is that whether it's ever outright stated or not, I do always have the headcanon that Aunt May kind of knows, or at least has like an inkling.
I think,
but it's certainly not really present in this trilogy. But like even then, I still think that there are moments where she gives those kind of like motivational speeches to Peter, where in so many words she's kind of giving him that hero advice that he needs just as he needs it, kind of thing. And obviously that is serving the plot and it's script writing, but I like to think that she's a bit savvy and sort of, you know, wink wink nudge nudge, but doesn't say anything because he doesn't say anything.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So yeah, just wanted to give Aunt May a shout out. What I'll say, the only thing I want to touch on is why Spider-Man 3 is considered by most, if not all, to be the weakest of the three. And it's an issue that not necessarily has plagued Spider-Man, but is something that is very easy to fall into, a trapping. They just overclogged it with too many storylines. Because if Spider-Man 3 was just about Sandman, it would be a much better film. If Spider-Man 3 was just about Harry becoming a villain, it would be a much better film. If the film was just about Venom and the symbiote and the effect that it has on his relationship, it would be a much better film. But they're trying to put all of them into one, which makes sense because, you know, it's the third in a trilogy. Like if it was going to be a trilogy only, it would be the finale. So they kind of want to go big and go out with a big bang. So it makes sense that you would include multiple villains because you haven't really done that. I mean, Spider-Man 2 technically had Harry in it, but he wasn't a full-on villain. But yeah, like I think that the issue is not that anything in Spider-Man 3 is objectively bad. It's just that they put in lots of good things that have promise and then give no room for any of them to actually really take the limelight for any reasonable amount of time. And therefore it kind of just feels rushed and cobbled together, when in reality there was a lot in Spider-Man 3 that was actually really quite good. Executed maybe a bit roughly at times, certainly camping it up with Peter dancing and whatnot, which is memed to death. But, you know, I don't know what I would have done in that situation because I get why they did the things they did. It just didn't really pan out.
No.
And there was, like, inside baseball, Sam Raimi, who directed all of these films, he has been on record, and it's public knowledge, that there was intentions for a Spider-Man 4 with Vulture being the main villain. but they never really resurfaced. As far as I know, not because Spider-Man 3 did poorly, but just because it was received less positively. And I think Tobey Maguire wanted to move on to other things at the time. So a confluence of factors kind of made that never materialize. I think Mysterio was going to be in Spider-Man 4 as well, if I remember correctly. But yeah, like if Spider-Man 3 was cut in half and half of what they had in Spider-Man 3 was pushed into a Spider-Man 4, devoid of what I just talked about Spider-Man 4 might have been, I think Spider-Man 3 could have been like piece de resistance, perfect send-off kind of stuff. And again, by no means is it bad. It just sort of didn't really knock it out of the park for the final Tobey Maguire film. So,
yeah, I'd agree with that. Okay, for the record, just because my dad was driving me crazy with this, the other guy that works at the Daily Bugle, I can't remember his name. The guy that Peter gets fired, that ends up in like the symbiote suit, all that stuff, right?
Eddie Brock.
There you go. He is dead.
Yes.
Okay, my dad was like, "Where did he go?" And I was like, "Dad, he's like hella dead. Like he got vaporized. Like he's dead." And my dad's like, "No, he went somewhere." And I was like, "No, Dad,
No,
he's dead."
No.
He was like, "Well, where's the next film that tells me where he went?" And I was like, Dad.
There is no next film. Yeah, no, again, it's kind of like a suspension of disbelief where you just have to accept that, like, physically speaking, the logic of the symbiote doesn't really work all that well. Where, he jumped back in as the goblin bomb was thrown and he just kind of blended in with the symbiote. I think that's probably it, that you just have to assume that the symbiote, because it canonically can just consume matter and not like grow in size because of it. It's just sort of like it can eat whatever it wants. And because the venom part, devoid of the Eddie Brock stuff, was going crazy at the time, really freaking out because of all the noise and stuff, that he probably wasn't really worried about symbioting with a person anymore. So Eddie Brock was like, no, the power, jump back in to try and save it, and then not only got blew up by the bomb with Venom, but Venom was just, bugger it, I'm just going to eat this guy.
Yeah,
I don't need him anymore. So
okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sorry?
I said this to my dad. He was just wrong. Doesn't listen to me. Okay, I want to leave this open to discussion. But my vote is that I think we should not add this to our ranking list just because this is not technically part of MCU.
I was not going to add it. I think we can rank the films individually within the trilogy, but leave that as a separate little product.
I mean, I think that I really enjoyed the first film for its like simplicity. So I think that in the first film, I think it would just be like 1, 2, 3 for me if I were ranking the films.
Okay.
And then you already said yours is 2, 1, 3.
Yeah, 2 is top for me, and then 1 in the middle. Yeah, like I think for the record, I think they're all solid films. I do think Spider-Man 3 gets a worse rap than it deserves.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible. It was just
it's just sort of
Tobey Maguire trying to be like a bad guy was maybe not it.
Yeah. So yeah, like I again, I said at the start, I think they still hold up very well. I think that people interested that like Spider-Man, I think that these films are worth watching if you like Spider-Man as a character, whether you're introduced through the MCU or through Andrew Garfield films or through the games or whatever. I'd watching today. So I highly encourage it. And also, like I say, these revolutionized and kicked off really the true modern era of superhero cinema. It hadn't been done like this before. So for that alone, to me, it's quite special just in that specific regard as well. because don't know whether you know, Bree,
I know nothing.
but Kevin Feige, who runs all of the MCU, right? Lead producer, sole lead producer. He actually got started working on not only the X-Men films, but these Spider-Man films as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So he was integrally involved from the very beginning and helping produce these early films with X-Men and Spider-Man helped him sort of set the stage in his own head for what he would eventually obviously end up creating just a few years later after this trilogy was over. So without these Spider-Man films, we wouldn't have the MCU as it exists today. So for that, I must hold it in very high reverence.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know that. That's cool. You learn something new.
Yeah.
Every once in a while. Okay. I don't have anybody to add to my simplest. We're done with drinking. Let's see. Okay. What comes next?
I've hummed and hawed about what order, but I think we're going to do it in a block. We are going to do the 2 Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films next.
To be honest, I thought there were 3, so that's good news for me.
There are just 2. You will be relieved to hear.
I am relieved to hear.
Yeah. I did think about doing the next main thing in between, but I thought probably
Let's just
better
get our
just
homework out of the way.
Do the homework, get the Spider-Man stuff out of the way, and then we can get back on the main track.
Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 films for next time, you guys. Easier than watching 13 episodes of Daredevil.
Yikes.
All right, guys. I do want to give a special shout out to our current patrons. So we have Alpaca Tom, Fabulous Brianna, Brianna's mom, Brianna's brother, Nikolai at Night. Lindsay, Nikolai at Night. Cypher Primus, Brendan Myers, Marcus O'Neill. Lillian, Mimi J, David Hartright, Dave Harp, the Xbox Expansion Pass, Lee Navarro, Silicana, and Ellery Woods Parker III. Thank you so much for your support. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to hang out with us today. I hope you enjoyed it. And Sam, where can people find you?
Anywhere and everywhere at Sam Heaney, Heaney.
You can find me at Fabulous Brianna, FabulistBreanna. You can find Save the Game Media at Save Game Media for Twitter/X, or Save the Game Media for everywhere else, including Patreon. Come hang out on our Patreon. Come hang out on our Discord. We have a lot of fun discussions on Discord. The anime channel sometimes be popping, So if you want to talk about anime, it's there. So we will see you guys in 2 weeks, your time.